If you've ever had shoulder pain, you know the frustration, right? You go to a clinician, they move your arm around in these weird, specific ways, and you're just hoping for a clear answer. But what if the very tests they're using to find that answer are part of a much, much deeper medical puzzle?
So to figure this out, we need to take a hard look at the science behind those physical tests and ask a really simple question. How reliable are they? Like, for real? The answer? Well, it might surprise you, and it could totally change the way you think about a medical diagnosis.
Okay, first things first, let's define what we're talking about. These hands-on movements are officially called orthopedic special tests, or OSTs. The whole idea is that a specific movement will trigger pain in a specific part of your shoulder, pointing the clinician toward a diagnosis, like a rotator cuff tear or something called impingement. They're basically the cornerstone of a physical shoulder exam.
So with that in mind, let's put these tests on trial. I mean, for decades, they've been a fundamental part of medicine. But what happens when we actually hold them up to some serious scientific scrutiny?
Well, a huge 2008 systematic review did exactly that. A team of researchers, led by Eric Hegedus, dug through 45 different studies to see if these common tests could really do what they claimed to do. And this wasn't just a quick look. This was a major investigation into the evidence.
Now, to understand what they found, we need to get our heads around two key ideas: sensitivity and specificity. Think of it like this. Sensitivity is like a wide fishing net. It's great at catching everyone who might have the condition, though, yeah, it might snag a few healthy people by mistake. Specificity, on the other hand, is like a sharp spear. It's excellent at hitting only the people who truly have the condition. So the perfect test? It's got to be both a wide net and a sharp spear. Okay, so look what happens when we apply this to one of the most common shoulder tests out there, the NEAR test. These are the results from 4 different studies they looked at. In one study, it had high sensitivity, a great net, but terrible specificity. But in another, it was the exact opposite, a bad net, but an incredible spear. And the other 2 studies are kind of just stuck in the middle. I mean, the numbers are all over the place.
So here's the crucial point. If you're a clinician, which result do you trust? Is the NEAR test a wide net or a sharp spear? The evidence is just deeply, fundamentally inconsistent. And that lack of reliability makes it incredibly difficult to know what a positive or negative result actually means when you're with a patient.
And this brings us to the review's incredibly blunt conclusion. The researchers did not pull any punches here. They basically state that there is a profound lack of clarity on whether these tests are actually useful for telling one shoulder problem apart from another. That is a huge statement, and it really challenges a cornerstone of physical diagnosis.
But wait, because the mystery actually gets deeper. What if the problem isn't just that the tests themselves are inconsistent? Let's zoom in on a specific condition, adhesive capsulitis. You've probably heard of it as frozen shoulder, and see how this whole thing gets even more complicated.
So, in a 2023 review, another group of researchers wanted to find the absolute best tests for frozen shoulder. They started with a mountain of research. We're talking nearly 1,800 studies. But then, look what happened. Right off the bat, they had to throw out over 1,700 of them because they didn't even meet basic quality standards. And after a closer look, only 9 studies were left. A whole mountain of research was just gone.
Let that number just sink in for a second. 0.5%. That's the tiny fraction of all the published research they could find that was actually good enough to include in their analysis. This isn't just a small issue, it's a shocking scarcity of high-quality evidence for a really common and painful condition.
So you have to ask, why is the evidence so thin? Well, the review points to this staggering foundational problem. They state that a universally accepted definition of what frozen shoulder even is still lacking. Without that, you have different studies, different clinicians, different medical groups, all basically describing different conditions.
And this brings us right to the heart of the matter. It's a critical question. How can we possibly develop an accurate test for a condition when the scientific community can't even agree on what that condition is in the first place? It's like trying to design a test to find blue cars when no one can agree on what the color blue even looks like.
So this really reveals the hidden challenges that make good evidence so hard to find. It's not just one thing. It's a combination of all these factors that create this fog of uncertainty in the research.
Okay, so let's break down these roadblocks. There's something called originator bias, which means tests often get these amazing results in the first study done by the person who invented them, but then they don't perform as well in later studies. Then there's recruitment bias. I mean, if you can't even define a condition, you can't be sure the patients you're studying all have the same problem. And finally, a lot of these studies are just too small to be truly reliable.
So after all of this, what does it mean for you, the patient, who's just trying to figure out why your shoulder hurts? How are you supposed to navigate this uncertain landscape?
The first and honestly the most important takeaway is this. This is not a reason to distrust your clinician. Not at all. It's about appreciating the real-world limits of the scientific tools they have to work with. They're operating inside a system where the evidence is often really murky and inconsistent.
And this is exactly where a clinician's experience becomes so incredibly valuable. You see, a skilled practitioner isn't just relying on one single test result. They're weaving together the results of multiple imperfect tests, your personal history, your specific symptoms, and their own pattern recognition that they've built up over years and years of practice. They are interpreting clues, not just reading a lab report.
So, what's the path forward? Well, according to the scientists behind both of these major reviews, the solution is pretty clear. The medical community needs to get together and create solid, evidence-based definitions for these conditions. Only then can they really conduct the kind of large, high-quality studies that are needed to truly validate, or maybe even invalidate, these diagnostic tests.
So the next time you're in a clinic and a doctor is trying to solve the puzzle of your pain, maybe you'll have a new appreciation for the challenge they're facing. And it leaves us with a final kind of provocative question to think about. How much of what they do is a precise, clear-cut science, and how much of it is really a deeply practiced, intuitive art?